Sergey Grigoriev. In the remote depths of Siberia, in the quiet town of Ozersk, a horrifying tragedy unfolded that defies belief. Sergey Grigoriev, a 41-year-old hunter, raised a wild brown bear cub he found abandoned, treating it like a pet. But years later, that bond would turn deadly. When the bear named Vorchun escaped from its cage on Sergey's property, it unleashed a brutal rampage. The bear attacked Sergey, the very man who raised it. Vorchun showed a terrifying display of raw, unstoppable power. Police who arrived at the scene were forced to shoot. What led to this unimaginable horror? And could it have been prevented? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking last minutes of Sergey Grigoriev, the hunter who was killed by his own pet bear. But before we start, if you're new here, welcome. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video so others can learn from this shocking story. Now, let's begin. Sergey Grigoriev was a 41-year-old hunter and animal lover living in the small town of Ozersk, located deep within Russia's Chelyabinsk region. Known to his neighbors as a quiet man with a passion for the wilderness, Sergey's life changed forever, 4 years before the tragedy that would take his life. During one of his routine excursions in the snowy Siberian forests, Sergey came across 2 helpless brown bear cubs. The mother was nowhere to be found, and the cubs were vulnerable, likely abandoned or orphaned. Moved by a rare compassion, Sergey decided to rescue the 2 tiny creatures and raise them himself. Life was difficult and unusual. These were not ordinary pets, but Sergey, driven by a deep bond with the bears, nurtured them on his small suburban plot. He gave 1 cub away, unwilling to risk its future in cruel hands. The only offer he had came from a bear baiting station, a place notorious across Russia for its brutality, where hunting dogs are trained to attack live bears in bloodthirsty contests. Sergey refused to send the cub there. He kept the other cub, whom he named Vorchun, or Grumbler, a fitting name for the bear's soon-to-be fearsome nature. Vorchun grew rapidly, strong and wild, even though Sergey cared for him as if he were family. His modest home in Ozersk was surrounded by towering pines and rolling snowdrifts, a typical Siberian scene. A cage was built in Sergey's garden, meant to keep the bear confined. But as Vorchun matured into a massive adult, the danger lurking beneath the surface became impossible to ignore. Despite the warning signs and several aggressive incidents, Sergey refused to part with Vorchun. Friends and neighbors urged him to get rid of the bear for his own safety. They warned him, wild animals raised in captivity don't lose their natural instincts. But Sergey was determined. He believed his bond with Vorchun was stronger than nature itself. What happened next would shock the community and ripple across the region. The wildness within Vorchun was about to explode in a violent way that Sergey and those around him could never have imagined. From the moment Sergey brought Vorchun home, he kept the bear confined in a large cage built on his property in Ozersk. The cage was meant to protect both the bear and the people around it, but as time passed, it became clear that this was a fragile barrier. Vorchun was no longer a harmless cub. Over the course of 4 years, Vorchun grew into a massive, powerful adult brown bear. What had once been a small, vulnerable animal became a towering force of nature. His claws grew sharp and his muscles thickened. The wild instincts that all bears carry beneath their surface began to emerge, making Vorchun unpredictable and dangerous. Neighbors recall seeing Vorchun pacing aggressively in his enclosure, growling and showing signs of frustration. This was not a tame pet. This was a wild animal confined against its nature. Local residents remember warning Sergey that keeping such a beast in captivity was a risk too great to take lightly. One neighbor said, "We told him many times that Vorchun could hurt him, but Sergey was stubborn. He believed he could control the bear because he raised it from a cub." Experts in wildlife behavior agree that no matter how much a wild animal is raised by humans, it does not lose its instincts. Bears are inherently territorial and aggressive, especially adult males. An expert in Russian wildlife management explained, "Wild animals do not understand human boundaries the way pets do. They can become aggressive without warning, especially when confined or stressed." Despite these warnings, Sergey refused to give up Vorchun. His bond with the bear, forged over years of care, blinded him to the danger. Even after Vorchun attacked Sergey once before, the hunter ignored advice from friends and family to remove the bear from his property. This decision would have devastating consequences. The growing power and wildness of Vorchun, combined with Sergey's refusal to heed caution, set the stage for a tragedy that shocked an entire community. Vorchun was no longer a cub to be cared for. He was a beast, and the cage that held him was growing weaker by the day. On a cold, gray morning in late winter, the quiet town of Ozersk lay beneath a thick blanket of snow. The icy air bit sharply, and the landscape was still. But on Sergey Grigoriev's property, a storm was about to erupt. Sergey, the 41-year-old hunter and animal lover, had been missing for several hours. His relatives grew increasingly worried when he failed to answer calls and did not show up as expected. Concern turned to alarm when they remembered Vorchun. The massive brown bear Sergey had kept for years was still loose in the cage, or so they thought. With no sign of Sergey and rumors swirling that the bear had somehow escaped, the family contacted local police in Ozersk. Officers quickly arrived at Sergey's remote home, preparing for a dangerous and unpredictable situation. What they found was a scene of chaos. The cage meant to contain Vorchun was wide open. The bear was free, roaming the snowy garden and surrounding woods. Vorchun's massive frame was imposing and wild as he moved aggressively through the property. Two of Sergey's dogs, loyal companions to the hunter, had confronted the bear in a desperate attempt to defend their owner. Tragically, they were no match for Vorchun's power. The bear attacked and killed both dogs, leaving behind only bones gnawed to the marrow. Police and family members navigating the snow-covered yard discovered a gruesome trail of blood, staining the pristine white snow. The crimson streaks led them deeper into the property, hinting at a violent struggle that had taken place. Despite the danger, the police knew they had to act swiftly. The bear was no longer a captive. It was a lethal threat to anyone nearby. The officers prepared their weapons, ready to do whatever was necessary to protect the town from this unleashed force of nature. But beneath the snow and blood, something even more horrifying awaited. The skeletal remains of Sergey Grigoriev, the man who had raised Vorchun from a cub, now torn apart by the very beast he once called family. When police officers arrived at Sergey Grigoriev's property in Ozersk, the scene was tense and dangerous. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn, fully aware of the threat posed by a massive brown bear roaming freely in the snowy yard. The cage that had once confined Vorchun lay open, its door swinging in the cold wind. The officers moved carefully through the garden and surrounding land, scanning for the bear. It wasn't long before they spotted him. Vorchun, the powerful adult bear, pacing aggressively and growling, his wild eyes scanning the officers with suspicion and raw menace. The bear's sheer size and unpredictable behavior left no room for hesitation. As the police searched the plot, their worst fears were confirmed. Among the trees and snowdrifts, they found the skeletal remains of Sergey Grigoriev, his body brutally torn apart, stripped down to the bone. Faced with the threat of the rampaging animal, the officers were forced to take swift action. Using their service weapons, they shot and killed Vorchun on the spot to prevent any further danger to the community. Following the incident, the local police issued an official statement. Officers used their service weapons to neutralize the dangerous animal after it escaped containment. As a result of the measures taken, the bear no longer poses a threat to citizens' lives and health. Senior Detective Alexei Petrov, overseeing the investigation, provided insight into the tragic event. The cage was found open, and the bear was roaming freely, showing aggressive behavior. On the property, we discovered the skeletal remains of a man. The bear had also killed 2 dogs belonging to the victim and relatives. This case is being thoroughly examined by the Russian Investigative Committee to determine all circumstances surrounding the attack. The investigation continues, with authorities piecing together how a bond that began with compassion turned into a deadly disaster. A grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of wild animals, even those raised in captivity. After the bear was shot and the immediate danger neutralized, the Russian Investigative Committee launched a full investigation into the tragic death of Sergey Grigoriev. Based in Moscow, the committee dispatched a team to Ozersk, Chelyabinsk region, to gather evidence, interview neighbors, and assess the circumstances that led to the deadly attack. The investigation aimed not only to determine the exact sequence of events, but also to evaluate the responsibilities and decisions that contributed to this fatal outcome. As investigators sifted through the facts, one critical issue emerged: the risks of keeping wild animals as pets. In Russia and around the world, incidents involving humans raising wild predators are not uncommon, but they always carry a high level of danger. Experts in wildlife behavior stress that habituating wild animals, even those rescued as cubs, can quickly lead to unpredictable and violent situations. Dr. Ivan Mikhailov, a leading Russian zoologist, explains, "No matter how much care or affection a person gives, wild animals retain their instincts. They are not domesticated and can attack suddenly, especially when stressed, confined, or feeling threatened. These risks become even more severe with large predators like brown bears, whose natural strength and territorial aggression make them particularly dangerous." According to official statistics, wild animal attacks in Russia have increased over recent years, with many linked to people attempting to keep or interact with wildlife illegally. Such tragedies highlight the importance of public education on animal safety and stricter regulations on exotic pet ownership. The death of Sergey Grigoriev serves as a sobering reminder that compassion for animals must be balanced with respect for their nature, and that wild creatures belong in the wild, not behind cage bars in a suburban garden. The tragic death of Sergey Grigoriev sent shockwaves through the quiet community of Ozersk. For his family, the loss was devastating, a sudden, violent end to a man known for his deep love of animals and the outdoors. Relatives spoke of Sergey as a passionate hunter and caretaker, someone who had a unique connection with the wild creatures around him. But now that connection had become a source of unbearable grief and confusion. His closest kin struggled to reconcile the loving person they knew with the harsh reality of what had happened. Neighbors, too, were left shaken. Many had admired Sergey's determination to care for the bears, but had quietly feared the risks. Now the warning signs they had voiced felt tragically validated. The snowy streets and forests of Ozersk seemed heavier, weighed down by the memory of a friend lost to the unforgiving wilderness so close to home. The story quickly spread beyond the region, attracting media coverage across Russia. News outlets highlighted the dangers of keeping wild animals as pets, sparking nationwide conversations about animal welfare, human safety, and the complex bonds people form with nature. This incident exposed the complicated relationship between humans and wildlife in rural Russia. In isolated communities where forests stretch for miles and wildlife is a constant presence, the desire to tame and care for wild creatures runs deep. For many, these animals represent more than just beasts. They are symbols of freedom, strength, and connection to the land. Wildlife expert Dr. Elena Voronina explains, "People who keep wild animals often do so out of compassion or sometimes loneliness. They want to rescue or bond with these creatures, but the reality is that wild animals are not domesticated. This emotional connection can blind people to the real dangers involved." Psychologists add that the urge to control or protect nature can be driven by a need for purpose and identity, especially in remote or rural settings where human interaction may be limited. Sergey's story is a heartbreaking example of how love and respect for wildlife can turn into tragedy when the balance between human and animal instincts is lost. The tragic fate of Sergey Grigoriev stands as a powerful lesson for all who watch. No matter how much time, care, or affection is given, wild animals remain unpredictable forces of nature. Even when raised from a cub, creatures like brown bears carry instincts and behaviors that cannot be tamed or controlled by humans. Sergey's story reminds us that captivity does not erase these natural traits. It only masks the danger until the moment it erupts. For anyone watching, this is a strong warning. Keeping wild animals as pets is not only illegal in many places, but also incredibly dangerous. The risks extend not just to the owners, but to families, neighbors, and entire communities. True respect for wildlife means recognizing their place in the natural world, in forests, mountains, and protected reserves, not confined to backyards or cages. Proper safety protocols and legal protections exist to keep both humans and animals safe. In Russia and worldwide, bear conservation efforts focus on preserving natural habitats and preventing human-wildlife conflicts through education and sustainable policies. These approaches offer real hope for peaceful coexistence, far better than dangerous attempts to domesticate wild creatures. Let Sergey Grigoriev's story be a solemn reminder. Love for animals must always be paired with wisdom, respect, and caution. The story of Sergey Grigoriev is a shocking reminder of the fragile line between man and nature, a line that, when crossed, can have deadly consequences. A hunter and animal lover from Ozersk, Sergey's compassion led him to raise a brown bear from a cub. But that bond ended in tragedy when the bear he cared for turned on him, claiming his life in the snowy wilderness he called home. As the cold winds sweep through the forests of Chelyabinsk region, the memory of Sergey's last moments lingers, an echo of a warning written in the claws and teeth of a wild predator that no human hand can truly tame. Bears may seem gentle but never forget. They carry the wilderness inside them, untamed, unforgiving, and always dangerous. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more true stories of the wild to light, reminding us all to respect nature's power. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check back for our next new video.